Welcome to another edition of the Bucknuts Happy Hour, a spring edition as we're starting to get closer to that, at least in Columbus, Ohio, where the Buckeyes reside. I'm Patrick Murphy, and today we're going to talk some Ohio State Pro Day. The Buckeyes held that event at the Woody Hayes Athletic Center on Wednesday afternoon. We'll discuss some Buckeyes secondary things, the defensive backfield, and we'll touch a little March Madness and the Big Ten and the issues that conference has had in the tournament yet again. To get us started, though, I'm going to bring in Tim Hall from the Buckeye Show and 97.1 The Fan. Hi, Timmy. How are you?
Just can't get a minute here in the studio, man. Can't get a freaking minute. You were just 20. Here we go again. Just come on in, boys.
You're just the man in demand.
Hi, Pat.
Hey, Pat, how you doing? All right, back to
Well, Tim, for those who aren't watching, watching live, who do we?
Life with the Fan. You know, I should turn the microphone on, amateur hour for me. That way, that on-air light is out there. I still don't think it would work though, because they know I'm not on the air. It'd just be a light. Just doing a podcast with my buddy. But yeah, I was saying, like 20 seconds before you pulled me in, Tyvis Powell just walked in mid-sentence like, "Hey, Tim, you never told me, blah." I'm like, dude, I'm about to go on. And then sure enough.
This is what happens when you record via the internet as opposed to everybody in one place together. But how you doing?
That was probably the best moment of this whole entire podcast run, though, don't you think?
It probably was. And if you couldn't see it live, or you're not watching this, you're listening to the version, we're sorry you missed Tyvis popping in to say hello. Tim, you sipping on anything over there?
Yeah, we're sipping on some coffee here because I'm just really firing on my work day. I'm not an alcoholic, so I'm not drinking alcohol right now. Boy, just imagining a little Bailey's Irish cream in here, though. That would be nice. And speaking of that, no more than 10 minutes ago when I was listening to my music app on the way in, because I just got here, and Dropkick Murphys. How ironic, right?
Yeah.
Dropkick Murphys. Have you heard The Boys Are Back? I don't know if I'd heard that song before.
That one doesn't.
Like, the boys are back and they're looking for trouble. It's pretty good. It got me going.
All right. I'll have to check that out. Yeah. I personally like the Dropkick Murphys just because of the name. I, too, am not drinking alcohol today. I've got water here. It's actually the second straight podcast I've drank water. I am committed to my fitness. The weather's turning. Summer's coming up. Got to get back in shape for the pools. So I'm going to go to the gym once we're done here. So can't be drinking beer and then going to the gym, right? That just doesn't.
Well, I've seen you at these media availabilities, and you wear these shirts that are sort of revealing. You wear these shirts that sort of show the pecs and the guns. I think Pat Murphy is hitting that bench. I think he's hitting the bench, baby.
Yeah, today's not a bench day, but I try to stay in decent shape. Doesn't always work, but I've committed to going today. So anyway, enough about all that. Let's talk some Buckeyes and specifically some pro days. Tim, you and I were both out at the Woody yesterday. Let's talk workouts first. We'll get into some of the stuff we heard from the Buckeyes after, but was there anything from the workouts that we saw that stood out to you? Now, for people that have never been to this event before, we're kind of pushed into a corner. So there's not a ton. We can't see everything that happens. So like the offensive line drills, for instance, were way down on the other side and there were people around. But of what we could see, Tim, what stood out to you from Pro Day?
Well, I mean, I think the thing that everybody's going to focus on was CJ Stroud throwing to Jackson Smith-Njigba. That was the big ticket item. Look, I totally get people that make fun of this day too, and how it's a little bit overboard, and we're just kind of glorifying these tremendous athletes that are going out for a workout. Why would this be such a huge deal to NFL teams? But hey, man, what do I know? They're all showing up. They're all paying their way to get here. I would think most of the work's been done already, but for a guy like Jackson Smith-Njigba, who's been coming off a season-long injury, I understand why that's more important for him to kind of show what his route running ability is, just the jitterbug element that this guy has. I think he even mentioned in a quick little media session how he likes to kind of get jiggy out there. He went with the old Will Smith. So that was nice. I liked what I saw with Jackson Smith-Njigba, just with the way he was moving out there, pads or no pads. Obviously, when you put CJ Stroud in that kind of environment, he could throw 50 balls. Maybe 2 of them might hit the ground because that's how good he is. So no problems there. I also thought Paris Johnson Jr. screaming at the top of his lungs. You could just see how that guy works hard at every single rep. That was another thing that stood out to me. And there you go, man. That's probably your 3 first-round picks, at least that are solidified. So those were the things that popped off the page to me, Pat. What about you?
Well, I like all that. I saw a few people, national writers that talked to media member or talked to NFL people that said Paris Johnson probably was the guy who helped himself the most. That's surprising to me a little bit because I thought Paris did a lot of great things while he was at Ohio State. But maybe this, for a lot of people, maybe this is the first time seeing him up close and seeing just how physically big he is and whatnot. Guy can move too. I will piggyback off of your CJ Stroud thing because, look, that was the show, right? I mean, as soon as they went to the throwing, everybody's eyes are on what CJ's doing, what the receivers are doing. I thought Jackson looked good, which was important because obviously the hamstring that caused him to miss most of the season. But Marvin Harrison Jr. may have been the most pro-ready guy on that field, and he still has another year of college to go. I mean, he just looked – we've seen some of these receivers a few years ago, Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, I think Jackson maybe too, did these routes for Justin Fields, and they looked good doing it. Marvin looked like this was just another day at the office. There were no nerves. I mean, he just fits – he already could fit into an NFL offense, I think, and you saw that again. He was, I think, the best receiver out there. Just looking at what he was able to do, I was really impressed with him. What'd you make of Marvin, Tim?
Marvin's so good. I mean, is there anybody out there at all that doesn't think Marvin Harrison is sensational? What did we hear Joel Klatt say? He said he thought he was going to be the best football player in the league in 5 years' time. He was saying that as this guy was just in the middle of his true sophomore season with the Buckeyes. And you know what's interesting about that? Because, yes, everything that you just said, most ready-made guy for the pros, and he's not even eligible yet. Some guys are different, right? Like, I understand why the NFL wants to keep it at 3 years and out, 3 years out of high school, and not make any exceptions. I totally understand that. But that doesn't mean that some guys aren't elevated, some guys aren't ready with their physicality, their body, their mind, the mental aspect. I think Marvin Harrison Jr. checks every single one of those boxes. Now, Marvin Sr. was there. That was the first time I'd gotten to talk to him. So I thought that was cool. I mean, anytime you got a Hall of Famer, the dude who, knows what it's like to play for a Hall of Fame quarterback as well. And I asked him sort of about the hype with his son, as we all hear it, we all feel it, everything that you just said. And Marvin Sr. didn't want to take the bait on that. He really didn't give any thoughts at all about where this is going after next year, which kind of maybe illustrates how they have always put in the work and not really thought too much about what's coming next. Living in the moment. I mean, maximizing every single season, and I think boiling it down to every single practice, every single rep. I mean, this is a guy that has an NIL deal with the Jugs machine. He is out there all the time working on his craft. There's a physical aspect to it with Marvin, but maybe more importantly is the off-the-field stuff, the willingness to want to work, the desire to work at it. And his dad also said, look, you see him now. He didn't just get good like this last year. This is a constant build-up process from when he was a young man, the mindset and how much he's worked. So, I mean, I think he's like everybody thinks at this point. He is a home run. He's the first wide receiver off the board next year. He's probably a top 5 pick. He might be, I don't know. Haven't we had wide receivers taken number 1 overall So, I mean,
It's been a while.
top three. I know it seemed like the Lions were taking a wide receiver top 3 or 4 every year for a while with Matt Millen, but he is going to go high, really, really high.
Yeah, he's always been impressive, but to see him in that setting with kind of everybody looking at him. Some other guys I thought, while we're just touching on it, I mentioned Jackson. I thought Zach Harrison, who didn't run the 40, and we had Rob Lambert asked, did CJ run yesterday? No, he did not. He was asked about it afterwards, said he didn't feel like he needed to, that the film shows he's elusive when he needs to be and can escape the pocket, but didn't feel like this was that was a necessary thing to run the 40. But I thought Zach Harrison, just the physicality, the freakish athleticism that he possesses was on display with some of his workouts. He was, he may not have been as productive at Ohio State as many people thought as a 5-star recruit coming out of high school, but the abilities that he does have are clear when he's in these type of workouts. And I think you saw it as his Ohio State career progressed throughout, these last 4 years. I think it was also noteworthy that literally every team was represented. They did not miss on coming out to watch these Buckeyes. And the Carolina Panthers sent 14 representatives from their organization, including their head coach, their GM, and their owner, one of their owners, to watch CJ Stroud throw. Now, if you haven't been paying attention, the Carolina Panthers have the number 1 overall pick. They had dinner with CJ and his family the night before. Look, Bryce Young, as we're recording this, Bryce Young's doing his pro day on Thursday, so he'll get his chance. But I thought CJ made as good of a case as possible to be that number 1 overall pick. Ryan Day said it was the best workout he'd seen. And remember, Ryan Day coached in the NFL. He's coached Matt Ryan. He's coached these guys at Ohio State. To say that, I think, says something. And I don't think Ryan Day was just saying it just to be nice to CJ. Did that look like the number 1 pick to you with the way he was throwing? I think he had 4 incompletions in 30-some minutes of throwing the ball around.
Yeah, and Patrick, look, it's all comparative to who else is coming out in the draft. I mean, I think that's the important thing. Does CJ feel like one of the best all-time quarterback prospects? Certainly not, no. But with everything that we've seen this guy put down on film, we've watched every single throw, you and I covering this team over the last 2 years. And then even his long run the year before, right? His touchdown run, which was like his only play of his first year here at Ohio State. This guy's got enough tools in the tool bag to make you feel good about him being the number 1 overall pick. I like him better than anybody else that's available. I like Bryce Young second, even with the lack of size, because the guy has shown to be a playmaker, and he's done it against really good competition. And we've seen short guys in the NFL now. I don't love it that he doesn't have the height, but I'm not going to steer away from a guy who I think is a really, really good football player and a good dude because of height. But I do like the fact that CJ's got that on Bryce, and
6'3".
I like the fact that he had that Georgia game where he showed a little bit of what he wasn't showing enough throughout the course of his 2-year career, which was the willingness to just take what is there with his legs. And he later admitted, I thought that was really interesting, after the combine when he had the media car wash, some of the many things that he said, that was maybe the thing that stuck out to me the most, is that as much as he kind of debated, and maybe that was the most abrasive we ever saw CJ. And he really is, I want to make it clear, he's not an abrasive guy at all, but as far as when he would deal with the media, I think he just heard it so much. And he probably looked at the win-loss record early on. I said, we're winning. Like, we're not even in close games. I am better as a pocket passer, so I want to keep my eyes down the field. Maybe he thought that was his best way of proving to the NFL folks how I will throw the football. I don't need to put myself at risk by running and taking hits because I can get the ball delivered through the air even when a play breaks down. I understand some of that, but when he later admitted that he needs to do that and it's part of being a football player, even at the next level, I thought that was something. But I'm with you, man. The Panthers really, really opened it up here. It certainly feels like he's the number 1 overall pick, and that would be cool, right? Because that's sort of the last straw here. Ohio State's seen it all, done it all, put guys into the pros, smashed first rounders, with that, 2006 and then the 2016 draft where they just had, I think it was 6 in each of those first rounds, but looking for that number 1 overall pick once again. Haven't had it since the Pancake Man, since Orlando Pace, and that is an awful long time. Certainly feels like, and this sort of like, it doesn't seal the deal because CJ's got to then go to the NFL and be something, but as far as trying to accomplish having that quarterback that makes it in the league, looks like Justin Fields will finally be that guy, but to have a number 1 overall pick that then goes out and becomes that QB that you've been looking for, where you could put the posters all over the place in the Woody. And CJ, hopefully you'll still be doing it and leading a franchise 10 years from now and maybe beyond. And that would be awesome to see.
Yeah, I mean, look, if he's not number 1, he may go number 2. He could go number 4. Number 2 is the Texans. Number 4 is, I believe, the Colts. There's Vegas is 7 or 8, and Atlanta's in there as well. So, I mean, it seems almost assured he will be top 10, if not higher than that. So, and you said it earlier, you got Paris Johnson, who's probably going to be somewhere in that top 15 range. Jackson Smith and Jigba, I thought this plus what he did at Pro Day really helped him, or at the Combine, really helped him show, look, I'm healthy, I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
And, we'll see some other guys from there. I think, Zach Harrison, I mentioned earlier, you're going to have some of the defensive guys drafted. I thought Tanner McCalister working out with no shirt on was impressive. The guy has maybe a 12-pack and looks just ripped. He ran well. These guys I think almost all of these guys are going to come off the board. We'll see where a guy like Mitch Rossi fits in the NFL, if it's not with the San Francisco 49ers, because that seems like a perfect fit to me to go in there and be that Kyle Juszczyk type of guy.
I talked to him yesterday. If folks want to listen to my podcast from yesterday for the Buckeye Show, I had a nice 3 or 4 minutes with Mitch Rossi. The media wasn't swarming around old Mitch, but man, I think people here in this forum and people that have loved Buckeye football really appreciate that guy. And what a cool story, right? And he allowed Ohio State to finally play some more traditional formations where you just haven't seen that in the longest time. And to get out there in the power eye, like fans really love that stuff. And for him to be versatile between, moving around in the box from a fullback, he could even just get up in a straight running back formation, play the tight end. I would not be shocked if this guy winds up getting an opportunity in the NFL. Maybe not get drafted, but certainly wouldn't be surprised. He's definitely going to a camp. That's a given. Yeah. But I'm talking about making it in the league. I think there could be a chance for him with, being that throwback fullback style of player.
I agree. I always think it's interesting the way that fans look at these Combine Pro Days. We have threads on our message board from yesterday about how guys hurt themselves or didn't. I think sometimes there's an overemphasis on these type of things. Like, look, CJ could probably lock up the number 1 pick potentially with the way he throws based on how he did. Jackson needed to show that he was healthy. But I think a lot of these guys, their film is what the coaches, the scouts, everybody is looking at, not necessarily what they do in, tights and a T-shirt on a indoor field when there's not football being played. So I think sometimes we overanalyze decisions not to run or, the decision to run. And if that affects you, I think it's just a piece of the puzzle. And I don't think it's as big of a piece as maybe some people think. Ultimately, these guys need to be able to play football. You want to test well, obviously, especially if you're a guy who's maybe lower down. But ultimately, you're going to be drafted on what you did on the football field. And I think that's the most important thing, not what you did at the Combine or at Pro Day. And I feel like this time of year, we kind of forget what these guys did on the field 3, 4, 5 years in college, whatever it may be. So, look, we're talking about it now, so maybe we're on the problem. But I don't know. I do think it gets a little bit overemphasized.
I'm just really excited. I know you love the draft too, Pat. And I think it is the greatest sporting event that is not a game.
Yeah.
Next, for me, right up next to Selection Sunday. I love that too. That is one of my favorite days in sports with the conference tournaments ending and then the bracket release of the greatest event in sports, in my opinion. But other than that, I'm like, you're a Champions League guy. Maybe you enjoy the draw, the show that they put on for that. That's pretty exciting, right? But the NFL draft, I mean, my God, it's in the off season, but they've done such a good job with that. Credit to them, man. It's one of our favorite sports in America. It sort of feels like our America's pastime now. And they just make that damn thing such a big deal. They dress it up. They've moved it around to different cities. I think that was a brilliant decision by them to let other fan bases across the country sort of feel like they're more of a party of it. I still remember when that thing was in Nashville, and then even Philly too, just some of just the swarms of people, even Cleveland, it was a great idea. I love the draft. It seems like we really do have a shot at this thing as Buckeye fans to see the number 1 overall pick go off the board, but yet you also don't know that for sure. So there's going to be a lot of anticipation and a lot of excitement going up to April 27th for that Thursday first rounder to see if you do get those 3 Buckeyes, will CJ be the number 1 overall pick? Because that's really and then if he's not, then yeah, 2nd, 4th, like, is there a slide? There's always that opportunity. I'm starting to feel like I'm just a talking version of the movie Draft Day now with Kevin Costner with everything that can happen. But either way, it's fun. I can't wait for it.
Yeah, the one thing, first of all, the NFL does a great job of staying relevant all year round. I think it's the only sports league in the world that has successfully done that. The one thing about the draft is once we get to Saturday and those later rounds, and you're getting the guys talking about like what they ate for lunch, and that's when I'm like, all right, let's get these Ohio State guys done. I don't need to sit here and watch this anymore. But the first night,
I'm a first round guy. I'm
Yeah.
a first round guy, Pat. Sorry to divulge that, but as far as the made for TV aspect, I am not. Unless I'm working, unless I'm working, getting paid to do some things, that would be a great job, right? I mean, unbelievable gig if you're working around the clock for the NFL draft and, just thinking and speaking about football the whole time. But as a viewer, I'll give you that first round. I think that's what they want out of you. The rest of that, I will get the up to minute, things. I'll have the pings for my team, what Washington might be picking, and then where these Buckeyes are going. Then maybe I'll go back and watch some of that stuff because it'll be taped and you can see like the snippets of what they're saying and all that, if there's anything fun. But credit to you guys out there if you're crazy enough to watch the entire NFL draft from Thursday all the way through the end of Saturday. Woo!
It's a lot, but it's fun. Tim, you mentioned Selection Sunday. I don't want to leave you without some basketball talk here as we head into the Sweet 16 as we're recording this Thursday. How's your bracket looking?
Bracket's okay, right? I mean, would you consider having 3 of your 4 Final Four still alive okay?
That's pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah, I would. So I took a shot with Duke. It wasn't really one of the massive upsets that pinched me. It was I wouldn't say Duke was under the radar, but still you're picking a 5 seed and you understand that the ACC wasn't terrific this year, but they were starting to hit their stride with a lot of really good young NBA type dudes. So it's a gamble when you're going with younger guys. We've seen how that's kind of run out of gas for Calipari, unless you've got like those really insanely high-end NBA dudes like the Anthony Davis types. Calipari has not been striking it very big in the NCAA tournament, and that's why he's likely going to be done there. So, I went with Duke, and they're the one that got knocked off. I was surprised to see Tennessee handle them the way that they did, but credit to the SEC and what Tennessee has been. They lost a key guy to injury, and it doesn't seem to matter. Ziegler's out, but they still seem to be a really dominant physical team, and Rick Barnes certainly knows what he's doing. I actually looked at him in the little like glossy media guide. Rick Barnes is up there with the most tournament appearances of all time. Like, it's crazy, right? Like that Rick Barnes, he's up there in the top 10 for most tournament appearances all time. But the bracket's okay. So I've got Bama, even though I hate to say it, Texas, Bama, and UCLA, just missing out on Duke. As far as the games today, man, K-State and Michigan State, you got Tom Izzo trying to clean up the mess for the entire Big Ten Conference again. That is a big-time game. Arkansas, UConn. I'm in one of these survivor pools as well, where you get extra credit for the seed points if you pick a higher seed. So I'm kind of honing in on Arkansas. Again, kind of going with the SEC and seeing how they've been the conference that's been a little bit ahead of everybody else. They're a really good team, and they took some lumps in the middle of the season with how they built their roster. But, I mean, they just knocked off Kansas. So I would be worried if I was a UConn fan. And, you got the FAU guys going again today against the Vols, and then Gonzaga and UCLA. You got to rewatch that Jalen Suggs buzzer beater in the pandemic tournament. If you haven't rewatched that today, that's just pure tournament bliss. What a shot. What a game that was in the Final Four years back.
You mentioned the Big Ten, and we'll end on this one with you. What do you make? I mean, this is not a new thing for the Big Ten. They haven't won the tournament, which is a hard thing to do. Only one team wins every year since 2000? Is that right? When Michigan State won?
Mateen, Cleaves, and Michigan State. It's sad, man. It's sad.
What do you make of this? I mean, look, the conference every year, we hear how deep it is, how good it is. We see the talent in this conference when with Ohio State and the teams that they play. Obviously, the style of play plays a part. I saw people on Twitter talking about how it's officiated different in the Big Ten. Yeah. What's your take as a guy who watches a lot of basketball? Yeah. Why can't the Big Ten represent well in the tournament?
I think both of those things that you mentioned plays a part in it, the way that the league is officiated and the slower style of play. Also, hear me out on this. I think, you see this specifically with Purdue, but even other teams. There have been some very nice, dominant college basketball bigs, but they have not been the type of athlete to really go on and crush it in the pros. You can even go with, I'll give Luka his chance, but Luka didn't walk into the NBA and wasn't some stud, right? Like I mentioned Anthony Davis before. Ain't nobody like that. You got these Purdue bigs. None of them have really made it. And again, I get it. You're going for success in college basketball. I understand that. But at the same time, those bigs have not really translated to success in the NCAA tournament. So that's why I'm mentioning just the overall talent of the player when I look at the next level. I usually try to keep it in college basketball because that's what we're trying to win at. I don't know how good of a pro Hunter Dickinson is going to be. Did I mention Kofi Coburn yet? Just a big plotting big who can't shoot free throws. That's just been a lot of what the Big Ten has been. And then when you combine that with style of play, the way it's officiated, randomness too, you got to throw that out there. It's also very random, and not always are the best teams going through. Purdue had that run to the Elite Eight when I thought it made more sense because they had an unbelievable scoring guard in Carson Edwards. And when they had him and they still couldn't make it, obviously they had Jaden Ivey here for the last couple of years. They still couldn't make it. Those are the types of players I think you need to have pumped up. It's the guards. Like I'll go with that. It's the teams that have dynamic guards that can defend multiple positions and they can score it well. Those are the teams, likely enough that will last. And defense too. Like you got to have these guys that are two-way players and really, really good defensive teams. There's been some upper echelon Big Ten teams. We're one of them here lately that have just sort of abandoned defense. Iowa obviously is one of them. Illinois has struggled with defense at times. So it stinks, man. It's time to stop making excuses, though. I mean, the one thing is you can't call yourself the best basketball league. I'm done with that. Like it's one of the best basketball leagues. Obviously, it's a Power 5 league. They send tons of teams to the tournament. They're good teams, clearly. Like they're good basketball teams in there. On their best day, they can beat one of the best teams in the country. We've seen them do it in the regular season. But if you continue to fall so short in the biggest event that we have that decides our champion at the end, you got to stop calling yourself the best league every single year. Like, what are we saying? The SEC is the best, or the Big East or the Big 12 is the best. SEC, Big 12, Big East. And that stinks because the Big East got plucked apart. That's kind of embarrassing because they were just the Catholic 7 for a while. They had to reconfigure their whole league. Georgetown has fallen off the map. You've been doing this. I mean, Butler wasn't good this year, but you've been pumping up Butler. You've been pumping up Xavier, some of these former mid-major programs. and they've even been having better success than you. So it's time to figure it out.
Yeah, absolutely. Real quick, I wrote something this week about how with what Ohio State's guard play was late in the season, perhaps that sets them up, plus some of the versatility that they've got in terms of what they can do in the post. Could you see if this team bounces back and has a year that, if this year becomes an anomaly, next year is back to the Buckeyes being a tournament team, does the roster set up well, you think, maybe for the Buckeyes to be a team that can make a run with Bruce Thornton and Roddy Gale and whatnot?
Especially, man. I mean, we don't want to think about Bryce coming back just yet, but if he does, it'd be unbelievable, right? But yes, just with what you saw with Bruce Thornton and Roddy Gale, that is what I'm talking about. Like, that's the kind of backbone that you need. And with Roddy showing that he could knock down threes like that at that clip, and we've seen him drive it too to the basket. So you could possibly have two guards that could play off of each other that way. And I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves too, though, because Ohio State clearly has a lot more to prove. Like, I'm not going to gift them a run to the Sweet 16 when we've never seen this coaching staff go to the Sweet 16 anymore.
Sure.
They got to prove that. They got to do that again. Some of it's randomness. You can get matched up against a good team, but it'll be on them to set themselves up with a better seed, because they've always, it's getting to the second round. That does mean you're one win away, and again, tournament randomness. But if you're getting matched up against a 2 seed in Villanova in that second round, that becomes increasingly more difficult to get that win. So it's on you to finally push through those tough games in mid-February and then into early March, and not let that, 3-game losing streak happen, or that stretch where you lose 4 out of 5. That'll be paramount to not let that happen. Even go back and forth for a bit. I'd be okay with that, with win-loss, 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 but try to avoid stacking losses late. Hopefully all this experience for these young guys will help with that next season. I hope so.
Yeah, for sure. I like what we saw from them in the tournament, in the Big Ten tournament, though. I thought that was promising. All right, Timmy, get out of here. I'm glad we could get some hoops talk in for you. Thank you. Good to see you yesterday. We say this every time, but we need to get together soon. Hopefully, once these sports slow down.
Absolutely, man. We'll listen to Dropkick Murphys, all of it.
Yep,
all
absolutely.
of it. What's the other Irish rock group besides Flogging Mollies? That's
Molly,
it. Yeah. Those are the two. Patty and the Rats now that we've talked about. So we'll listen to all of them. It'll be great.
All right. It's a date. Thanks for coming on, Tim. I do appreciate it.
All right, everybody. See you.
That was Timmy Hall from 97.1 The Fan. If you missed any of if you're watching this live, if you missed anything, Timmy and I talked about Pro Day yesterday. We were both out there at the Woody Hayes Athletic Center, and CJ Stroud and Jackson Smith and Jigba and all those guys. Then we hit on some hoop stuff. It's hard to not talk hoops during hoop season when Tim's on here, even if the Buckeyes aren't playing as they are right now. Tim just loves his basketball. I'm a big basketball guy. Tim is one of the more knowledgeable college basketball people, as you just heard. So thanks for talking about that with me there, Timmy. Let's get back into football, though, because I want to talk about the Buckeyes and spring practice and kind of looking ahead here. And I want to focus in. We've done some different position groups here as we kind of made our way through the spring. And I want to look at the secondary for this group, because I think if you're looking at questions, you've obviously got the quarterback on offense, the offensive line. If they get those two things right, the offense should be close to what it was last year, or at least around there. But on defense, it's, okay, what does year 2 of Jim Knowles look like? And how do the Buckeyes get this secondary fixed and get back to playing that type of football? Because we thought we saw it for most of last year. You look at the numbers, Ohio State, number 26 in the country in pass defense, 200.5 yards per game. Not bad, especially from a team that I think was just inside the top 60 or something the year before. So you thought you saw improvements there, and then you get towards the end of the season, and Ohio State starts to play some legitimate quarterbacks, some eventually really good quarterbacks, and the numbers start to change a little bit. Maryland, Ohio State on the road there. They won 43-30, so this isn't a game that gets talked about a lot because Buckeyes end up winning, but 318 passing yards And if you remember, Tagovailoa, the younger of the Tagovailoas, got hurt in that game, had to leave briefly. Now his backup only threw one pass, but completed it for 25 yards. So, look, you give up 318 of 402 yards. They stopped the run against Maryland, but Maryland threw all over the Buckeyes. And that's not a school. Yes, they've got some weapons. They've got a quarterback who is going to be an NFL guy, most likely. I don't know. He's not his brother, but he's talented. So they've got some guys, and it wouldn't have surprised me had you asked me going into the game, okay, well, will they give up some passing yards? Yeah, they give up a little bit, but I didn't expect 318 yards. And that's when I walked out of that game, and I remember talking with Steve Hellwagon about this as we left. Like, that's a little concerning. Like, that was the first time I was legitimately concerned about the secondary. I thought, obviously with the injuries and whatnot, there had been some bumps in the road. But you had that game. Then obviously you have the Michigan game. 278 passing yards given up to J.J. McCarthy. All but 15 of them were to J.J. McCarthy. He also threw 3 touchdowns. Now there were busted coverage, things like that played into some big plays, but the numbers still count. And those are part of the issues that we're talking about that need to get fixed. And then obviously you get to the Georgia game, and that's – you're playing Stetson Bennett, who of those 3 quarterbacks, I don't know what he's going to be in the NFL, but the guy's a national champion. He's obviously talented. 398 yards, 3 touchdowns. Obviously, I think the play that stands out to most people was the 70-plus yards through the air on one play where if you can just force Georgia to drive the field, then we're talking about maybe the Buckeyes, Georgia not having enough time to come back and win that game. Buckeyes going to the national championship against TCU. Doesn't happen because you give up that, not just because, but one of the big reasons you give up that big pass play. So let's look ahead and look at what the Buckeyes have coming back. We'll start with the corners. This is a group that not a lot of depth for the second year in a row, but some talent. Now, Denzel Burke, we expect to be the starter at that position. He's a guy, he'll be a third-year starter, a guy who's probably thinking NFL draft after this next season. Battled that hand-wrist injury last year, but look, he didn't have a good season. I think he'd be the first to tell you that it had to be better. There were better moments as he progressed, but if he's going to be the Buckeyes' number 1 cornerback, you've got to be better than that. You guys know the list of top cornerbacks that have come through this program. Denzel Burke, good freshman year, hasn't built on that in his sophomore year. He's going to be important to take that next step. Then there's a question. Jordan Hancock's a guy we heard a lot about. He never really materialized last year as a legitimate corner after coming back from an injury that happened in fall camp. Can he, with a full off season, hopefully he stays healthy, can he be that guy? Guy I'm really interested in terms of a starting cornerback, Davis Enigbenosin, the Ole Miss transfer, guy who played his freshman season last year in the SEC, played a good amount. And we walked into the first day of spring practice, and Davis Enigbenosin is wearing number 20, which is the number Sonny Styles, the safety, wore last year. We'll get to him in a minute. He looked – I had the two confused because if you've seen Sonny Styles, the guy is – just physically looks like he could be playing in the NFL right now with how big and just built he is. Davis Enigbenosin listed on the roster. I'm pulling it up here. He's listed at 6'203" on the online roster. Actually, I have the roster they handed out here. Let's see what they listed him on here. 6'2", 187. So a little bit taller, a little bit leaner than they initially listed him. This is a guy who I'm really excited about for the Buckeyes. He's a guy who has experience, as I mentioned, in the SEC, but he's just built differently than most cornerbacks I can remember coming through Ohio State. If we're just going to look through these cornerbacks, you've got Jordan Hancock, 6'1", Denzel Burke, 6'1", Jair Brown, 5'11", Jermaine Matthews, 5'11", Ryan Turner, 5'11". 6'2". It just, when you guys see this guy out there, and I assume you will in the spring game, you can tell he's just different. And I think that can be a huge advantage for the Buckeyes. They weren't going to promise him a starting spot but it would surprise me if a kid who was able to hold his own in the SEC last year isn't at least in that top 3. And I would have to think the top 2 of those corners. I think he can help this defense, assuming he continues to develop and everything goes according to plan, can help this defense take its next step in terms of the secondary, be one of these shutdown guys. I mean, his length, I listed the sizes there of the other guys, the heights of the other guys. His length is different for going against some of these top receivers. You've got to throw the ball differently against a 6'2" corner than you do against a 5'11" guy, because obviously he's taller, but his arms and the reach and everything, you've got to get it over that. So I think this could be a player that, that from the transfer portal that really makes a difference for the Buckeyes. I mentioned some of the younger guys there. Jair Brown, sophomore, Jermaine Matthews, freshman, Ryan Turner, sophomore. We'll see if any of these guys can get into a legitimate role. As I said, there's not a ton of depth there. And we saw last year when the Buckeyes had to kind of roll some guys due to injuries. We saw some young guys get an opportunity. You hope that they stay healthy, and those top 3 of Burke, Hancock, and Igmanosin can just be the guys. I'm not thrilled about the depth. I think these young guys will come along, but you're asking a lot of them, guys that haven't done a lot, if they have to step in and play. And this year you're going to be tested a bit more with some of the teams on the schedule. So this secondary has to take a step. As I mentioned, I think Davison Igmanosin is a guy who can help do that. If you look at the safety spot, you have some guys you have to replace. Ronnie Hickman's gone. Tanner McAllister's gone. You do get Lathan Ransom back, which is good. They need to figure out what Lathan Ransom's role is going to be between the 3 positions there. The assumption is that Jihad Carter, who is another transfer, came from Syracuse, will be that nickel spot that Tanner McAllister vacated. And like I was saying about Davison Igmanosin, Jihad Carter built differently than what we saw from Tanner McAllister. I think Tanner McAllister is 5'11", 5'10", something like that. He just measured at the pro day yesterday, so he's right around there. Jihad Carter, 6'1", 203, coming from Syracuse, had a good career at Syracuse. So if he does end up playing that slot corner, that nickelback position, he's a guy who could change the way they do things at that spot. Now, he also has the possibility of playing really all over. He can play any of those positions if needed, but I think that's where they're pegging him for. You're going to need a guy to replace Ronnie Hickman, who, look, I think Ronnie Hickman had a very inconsistent last year. I'm surprised that he decided to head to the NFL after a season like that, even though he had a very good season 2 years ago. I think his mind was made up even heading into the year that, look, this was going to be his last season, and wish him nothing but the best. But this gives an opportunity for someone, like I mentioned earlier, Sonny Styles. Can he be that guy? You've got Josh Proctor coming back, a guy with more experience, but I've said this before on this show and others, Sonny Styles has to get on the field. I think there's an opportunity there. He was a guy they were already starting to trust at the end of last season. And Sonny Styles, 6'4", 222 pounds. He's just a freak. If you watched him in high school, if you saw him at all last year, he can be a difference maker on this defense. I think he's got to be a guy that's on the field. Other guys, I mentioned Josh Proctor, Court Williams, a guy who actually I just ran into him out shopping the other day. His arm's still in a sling after having surgery during the season. Where does he fit in? Can he get healthy? He's been a guy that's been hurt a lot. A guy that, when healthy, gives you a lot of athleticism. Cam Martinez, another guy. How does he fit in? I think he'll battle with Jihad Carter for that slot spot. He's still kind of an athlete playing in the secondary. If he can figure it out, I like what he offers. But build-wise, he's more of that Tanner McAllister. We just haven't seen it come together for Cameron Martinez yet. Kai Stokes is another guy I know Buckeye fans are excited about after seeing him in the spring game last year. Didn't play a ton last year, a lot of backup stuff, but he's going to be in the mix for kind of that deep safety position. I know that there's not been a big rotation in the secondary. but I wonder if there is some more of that. If you have 3 safety spots and 4 guys that are contending to be starters, can you find a way to get, if you have Sonny Styles, you have Lathan Ransom, you have Jihad Carter, and, just for an example, you have Kai Stokes. We'll just say you could pick whoever you want there. But if you have that 4th guy who shows enough that he could be starting, how do you get him on the field? And I think it's going to be interesting. Ryan Day said the other day, and I want to learn more about this. When we talk to the secondary coaches, I want to ask about this. They said that they've kind of they changed Tim Walton's role, his title, and they're having the defensive backs meet together more as opposed to cornerbacks and safeties. So I will be interested to see how that works. Maybe guys are able to move around a little bit more. What was the reasoning behind that? Ryan Day touched on it a little bit, but I'd like to get some more understanding of why that was needed. I think obviously the results, as I mentioned at the top of this, the results weren't there. They did not play well in the biggest games of the year in the secondary. So obviously you needed to do something. I don't think they were going to ever fire Tim Walton or Perry Eliano after just one season. But you need to do something to get this better. And it's not just, well, let's try again year 2. No. So having these guys meet together, I think helps everybody be on the same page, speak the same language. I think that's an interesting idea. I do want to hear more about it and then, see maybe after spring how this is all working in terms of that strategy. If the Buckeye secondary isn't a big step forward, because we saw the linebackers play well last year, the defensive line, you could see more out of it, but still played well enough, I think. The secondary is what has to take the big leap this year. And I feel like we've said this a lot in recent off seasons about this group, but I think there's talent there. I mentioned the 2 transfer guys. I think those are both upgrades. I think bringing in a guy like Sonny Styles now with a year of experience. Remember, he should be coming in now. He reclassified, skipped his senior year of high school in Pickerington. So now he's got a year of experience. He's played some. How do you get him on the field to use his abilities? And then what do you do with some of those other guys? I think those are all going to be very important questions to get this defense right. And look, if this defense is just that much better against the top teams, if they had taken a little bit further of a step, maybe been able to help get some stops, you're talking about a team that probably figures out a way to beat Michigan. You're talking about a team that, even if maybe they don't end up playing Georgia, but whoever they play in the playoffs is probably more equipped to deal with what you see in that passing attack at that level. So I think that's the biggest thing on defense for the Buckeyes. You obviously have to get the quarterback and the offensive line figured out, as I mentioned. But if they can get that defense figured out, that secondary in particular, with the guys they have, I think you're looking at what can be a very good defense with the rest of them there. A couple quick questions here. Sue, I saw that you popped in late. Sorry about that. We did put it out on social media and on the message boards there, asking about Mitch Rossi. I would assume he did impress some scouts yesterday. Tim and I were talking about him earlier, asking if he's going to get drafted. Look, it's hard for a guy like that. I think he's not a true tight end in the sense of like a guy who's going to go out and catch passes for you, a blocking tight end, maybe in the later rounds. The kind of comparison that I've made and I've heard other people make is like a Kyle Juszczyk in San Francisco. And I think San Francisco could be a great fit for him if they're interested. That's a team that uses the run game, still uses a fullback, gets the fullback involved in the run, the pass game, a lot of things that the Buckeyes did there the last year with Mitch Rossi. And I don't know if everyone remembers this, but before Ryan Day was on the Ohio State staff, he was a member of the San Francisco 49ers coaching staff. So things have changed in San Francisco since then, but obviously he knows that organization. Just saying that could be a good fit. And then Mike Schaefer asked if the spring game will be an actual game. I think so. Ryan Day hasn't said. We are going to get the chance, and this hasn't happened in quite some time. We're going to get a chance to watch Ohio State scrimmage on Saturday, which will be very interesting. Obviously, we'll have coverage from that. Now, they may restrict exactly what we're able to talk about publicly after that. The NFL does that a lot, and Ryan Day did it early on in fall camp. I think his first year as a head coach, where like there are certain things you can and can't talk about. You can't necessarily jot down every formation and kind of lay that out, things like that they don't want out there. Spring ball, so maybe they'll be a bit more relaxed with what we can and can't print or talk about on these podcasts. But so that'll be interesting, and I think that'll give us some idea. But to your question, Ryan Day hasn't said about the spring game yet. I'm not even sure if they've had those conversations. I think a lot of times what goes into that is how healthy the team is. Are you able to actually field 2 full teams? Obviously there's some rotation there in terms of guys can switch teams in a spring game, but I think that you don't want to go out there and just not have enough guys on either side of the ball. So I think some of it will depend on how they come through spring practice. They don't have a ton of injuries right now. I think there's 9 guys that were out at the beginning, and we haven't heard a ton about other injuries. So I would assume you mentioned, Mike, the quarterback competition. I think that would be the best way. And Ryan Day's talked a lot this offseason about putting these guys in situations to compete, not just the quarterbacks, but the whole team. Obviously, a game-like setting is more relevant for something like that. You want these quarterbacks to experience that, especially a guy like Devin Brown. I think also you need to see what it's like for Brian Hartline calling plays. If you're gonna go that route come the fall, I still feel like Ryan Day is going to end up being the play caller this year, but they're trying to set Brian Hartline up to experience some of that. That would be a great game setting to do that in. Kevin Wilson has been, I think last year Kevin Wilson and Jim Knowles were the 2 head coaches of the team. So we'll see how they break it down. We'll certainly let you guys know when they make an official announcement, but I would be surprised if healthy and everything falls into place if they don't have an actual spring game and not some of the offense versus defense or some of the things we've seen in the past. All right, we're going to wrap this one up. Another edition of the Bucknuts Happy Hour in the book. For those of you who tuned in live, thank you. We always appreciate your comments and when you tune in. For those listening or watching later, you're just as appreciated. I realize it's the middle of the day on a Thursday. Not everybody can tune in for the happy hour, but that's why we put it on as a podcast. You can listen to it later. Thanks for Timmy Hall for coming on. If you missed anything with him, we talked pro day, CJ Stroud, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Marvin Harrison Jr., who won't be going pro yet, but looked like a pro at the WAC yesterday. And then we dove into some March Madness. And then I talked some secondary. So if you missed anything and you were tuning in live, this will be on our YouTube page, on anywhere you get your podcast. Please like, subscribe, especially on the YouTube page. We just put up a ton of videos from interviews from Thursday with defensive and offensive linemen, Justin Fry, Larry Johnson. So there's already some good stuff on there. We'll have plenty more. If you're not a Bucknuts subscriber already, I strongly encourage it. Look, it's not just recruiting. We have a lot of good stuff on there for VIP members. You also get access to the entire 247 Sports Network, right? So there's a lot of stuff there. If you're interested in other teams or some of our national writers, things like that, it's a good resource if you're a big Buckeye fan. Football and basketball. Our national basketball guys do a great job. We try and stay up to date on everything Buckeyes as well. So anyway, if you missed it off the top, I'm drinking water today. Have to go work out later, so didn't want to be slugging beers. But as always, thank you, Buckeye fans. Thanks, Bucknutters.